say, for instance, that's 1,000 permits. Now, the next step to that question is, how many of them go north on Adams Road of those 1,000? Okay, and how many of them go south, and how many of them go east and west on Pinconnet? You know, that's the next question. Let's say there's, you know, 200 of them. Let's say it's all equal. They go, and I have no idea, I'm speculating, you know, because as you go north of Dutton, you know, the population really thins out in a hurry compared to what it is south of Dutton in terms of school-age children production, because the density in Oakland Township is much less than it is down in Rochester Hills. So even if 10% of that traffic went north past Dutton, you know, how much of it goes, you know, right after school, how much of it gets delayed because of sports and other events that occur after school, and I appreciate having that, and we can obtain that.
I would be interested. I think that's important when we get ready to make a decision to, because after all, the school year is from September to June.
Right.
So we actually, it's July and August that we're not having that school in session, even though I do know there's summer school and other activities, but it's not for the number of children that they have there.
Right.
Well, I think it's always good to have more information, more data points
I
to
agree with
weigh
Jim.
in.
That's why I asked the question.
Okay.
I think we need to consider that.
But I also, and not to dismiss the point, but I also, my personal view is that we have a traffic study conducted by a professionally licensed traffic engineer hired by the applicant that conforms with the ITE standards. We have a review of this proposal with regard to traffic and the applicant's traffic study, that review being done by the Road Commission, who considered the question on the difference between summer and school year. And we have an independent review, actually not independent, a subjective review by somebody hired by the township. And they all reached the same conclusion. They all indicated that they took into account the differences throughout the year. So in my mind, I'm questioning, would the new data that you've requested, while I welcome it, could it be significant enough to change my view on this point?
Well, how do the other commissioners feel? I mean, as, you know, if they all feel as you do, fine, you know, I wouldn't insist upon it, but otherwise, as I say, I would like to see it, but I'd like to know how the other people on commissioners feel, if it's necessary. If it's not, fine, you know, I'll live with that then.
Respecting the fact that Barb is a retired school teacher, I think she carries a little more weight than my opinion on the matter, but what do you?
I think that living in the community, a lot of the residents, and maybe some of you feel that the analysis doesn't reflect the reality in a way, because we live it and we drive it, and we know how it gets backed up, and we know that Dutton, I think, was widened after 2006. And a lot of traffic comes off of I-75 and eastbound on Dutton now, that didn't before. Taking the pier exit off of 75 instead of taking the university, knowing that that's backed up. So coming off of 75, they head east on Dutton and back up to Squirrel during the afternoon rush hour about 4:30 on. So when they cite on this report the crashes between 2006 and 2010 at that intersection, I don't know if the traffic was consistent with what it is now back in 2006 because of that change. I just noticed that. So I don't know how to reconcile what I experienced driving in the community with what the traffic analysis shows.
Just to comment on that point, my residential street ends at Dutton Road, at the foot of the hill before you get to Orion heading east. And in the last several years, I don't recall whether it's 2 or 3 since 75, got access to Dutton Road, that traffic has increased significantly. But I would think that that would be included in the more recent counts done by Brinkerhoff.
Well, that certainly would be in their study, and therefore would have been peer-reviewed twice, Road Commission and the URS study. The other point I would throw out is that we don't have the option of considering, from a traffic perspective or really any other perspective here, it's not a question of whether that parcel is going to remain undeveloped or not. The question before us is, in concept, to develop it under this proposed plan as a retirement community, which, again, all three of the traffic experts have pointed out, and Mr. Nix pointed out in his memo, that that particular use results in less of a burden on traffic during the times when it's likely to be felt the most. In other words, I think part of the applicant's proposal is something for us to discuss and reach a conclusion on here as a commission before our recommendation to the township board is, do we agree that the proposed use with its higher density, one element we could consider is, does that result in more or less of a traffic burden, a realized traffic burden? Not so much in number of car trips, but that's one consideration, but in car trips when we feel it the most, when we're all backed up in traffic jams. And I think the conclusion reached not only by these three expert opinions under consideration with regard to traffic, but also others who have studied the matter, is that seniors as a demographic create less of a burden during the peak times. We've heard argument or comment from the public saying that many seniors are still working, and I tend to believe that's true, but maybe not on the same schedule the rest of us are toiling away on, perhaps, I don't know that. But anyway, just for consideration, that if this parcel were developed as a single-family residential, the implication by these experts is that it would result in a greater traffic burden during the peak rush hour. And so we're not, well, anyway, enough said about that. I think it's a consideration that we should explore. Was there something else from Larry's report that in particular that commissioners wanted to explore, or something that was missing that you wanted to see there?
Sure. I was just going to make a comment again on the traffic report and also on the road commission. It is unfortunate, I think, that the traffic counts weren't done maybe in prime time, school time, to really see what the impact is. One of the emails we received pointed out that the June count still may not be very valid because, you know, high school seniors may be, you know, again, past the use of the roads on a school type basis, certainly on a school schedule.
They would be the ones that would be
right.
driving.
And Oakland University also was past their normal scheduling too. You know, they were into the summer period already. It was unfortunate it was done at that time, that more accuracy could have been done there. The other thing I do find too is when the road commission did look at this, again, they aren't telling us, like Mr. Nix pointed out, that they aren't going to suggest something in the future. But again, they point out that they have no sign, or they have no intention of doing improvements down the road at this point. And it's concerning that, you know, here we are, any development on this corner, and the road commission is standing there is saying, telling us, well, no improvements yet.
Well, that's not to
It's
say
a concern that, again, I just wish there were a little bit more open-endedness there in that regard because of this problem spot along Adams Road.
Well, and not to suggest anything untoward on the part of the road commission, but any improvements would fall in their responsibility, as we are a township and they're responsible for the roads. However, they could have made a statement, which they didn't, I know, by its conspicuous by its absence. They could have made the statement that that improvements would be useful here, but they were going to be such a low priority on the road commission's schedule that they weren't going to be anytime soon. They could have made a statement like that. In which case, the township or the developer could have explored the possibility of suggesting improvements that are not paid for and done by the road commission, approved by the road commission, but not necessarily done by them. But I still go back to the question that, and maybe it's worth exploring at this point. As a commission, how do we feel, in light of all the input we received, with regard to the proposed use as a senior community on this corner rather than a single-family home community, for example, with regard to traffic? Do you perceive that as a greater or lesser burden on the traffic conditions if it's a senior community versus a single-family residential community of the density that would be allowed in this parcel? Nobody wants to chime in? Yeah, go ahead, fire away.
I think the traffic information that we've received and the discussions we've had about traffic and how the relative traffic generated by the single-family use versus the senior assisted and independent living facility use has convinced me that the senior and assisted and independent living facility use is less of a burden, especially during peak times. I find no room to argue with that.
I concur with that view, but I don't know if there's opposing.
I'm reluctantly agreeing with that. And the problem I'm having, it's not the present proposal. It's that we've listened to scores of residents saying it's awful right now. And I know that. I shifted my work schedule 2 hours so I can get through that intersection every day.
I understand that. And awful is quite a relative term.
I'm trying to clarify that a little bit. I think it's really awful.
Well, that's the danger in statistics and averages. I would posit that if you put one leg in a bucket of boiling hot water and one leg in a bucket of ice cold water, on average you're doing all right, but you're not very comfortable.
I guess I'd have to agree with you that, and again, I understand the conclusions and the recommendations here. I'm just frustrated because I wish the road commission had said, right now we should be thinking about improving the situation right now. And I think we've heard that dozens of times from the people who live there and travel through there.
Yeah, and nobody likes traffic. I'll include myself in that group of nobody. Nobody likes traffic. The inherent facts are, given the lower density of Oakland Township in general compared to Rochester Hills, and what do we have, a quarter of the population of Rochester Hills, and 4 times the landmass or something like that, or bigger than they are.
They're about 31. You got to net out Rochester. They're a 36-mile township. You take out Rochester, they're about 30, 31.
Okay. And we've got a quarter of the population. We are accustomed to less traffic out here.
So I'm reluctantly agreeing with the conclusion because I can understand it. There's these other issues which we have the power to solve right now.
Well, and the challenge of any development proposal, whether it's a retirement community or a single-family home, maybe traditionally structured as we see in the township, is that it's going to put more cars in the road. And all of us and all of you, we're part of the problem, not part of the solution. Unless, how many of you don't drive? How'd you get here? But how many of you don't drive? Right, so we're all part of that problem. And but that problem doesn't go away if we recommend the township board deny this proposal, and the township board follows that recommendation and denies the proposal, and the applicant comes back and says, well, I'll put in those single-family homes. Now what do we have? Now we may have fewer options to massage that or and no basis perhaps to deny it, and yet now we have single-family homes where you've got teenage kids that are driving and, you know, we're getting to that point where they start driving and they add to the traffic.